All right, so this is how I used to have to measure it back in the 1700s. The Reverend Stephen Hales invented this technique to measure blood pressure back in the 18th century. His technique involved taking a glass tube, making an incision in the horse's carotid artery, then placing the glass tube in that carotid artery, and seeing how high up in that tube the blood would rise. So this would allow you to see how the blood would be under pressure. So it's sort of a one-off measurement, as there wasn't really a good way to put the blood back into the horse. So, yeah. Anyway, Stephen Hales died in 1761, just a couple of years before I was born. Now, I'm told he was a great guy for an Englishman. Great at parties, made some very tasty quiche, of course. He was educated in Cambridge, by the way, so you can imagine how they feel about him. All right, now, we're going to talk about blood pressure now. And this is systolic and diastolic pressure. Systolic pressure is the pressure during systole. Systole is when the heart is pumping blood, is when the heart is actively pumping blood. When blood is under pressure being ejected from the heart. Diastolic pressure is when the ventricle is relaxing and blood is no longer exiting the heart. So the mean pressure is lower than an actual average between 120 and 80 here, because the heart spends more time in diastole than it does in systole. Now, in the aorta, you'll have peak pressure, peak systolic pressure, and minimum and lowest and diastolic pressure of about 120 over 80. And then in your farther arteries, the farther along you go, your systolic pressure is going to decline, but not as quickly as your diastolic pressure. Your mean pressure is going to drop for sure, though. Your arterioles, your systolic pressure and your diastolic pressure are going to drop, but your systolic is going to drop faster. These pressures are going to approach each other. Eventually, they will meet as you approach the capillaries. Then they'll meet in the capillaries and they'll be the same pressure. So your pressure is higher in the capillaries than they are in the venules, and they will be higher in the venules than they are in the veins, and they will higher in the veins than they are in the large veins like the vena cava. So, your pressure is highest in the arteries and lowest in the veins. A high pressure to low pressure system is what allows the blood to move through the body from arteries to capillaries to veins and back. The pumping of the heart, the diastolic pressure when the heart is relaxing, the low pressure in the heart, is what allows the blood to flow into the heart. And the high pressure of the heart contracting is what allows the blood to flow out of the heart and into the arteries. So, this constant beating of the heart is what allows the blood to flow continuously throughout the body. Now, systolic pressure is the pressure that is exerted during ventricular contraction. Diastolic pressure is the lowest level of arterial pressure that you will achieve before systole begins again. So, that pressure in quote-unquote normal circumstances, quote-unquote, is 120 over 80. That is a normal adult pressure. Now, there is a wide range of what is considered normal. In children, that number should be significantly lower, and in elderly, it could be significantly higher. So this number is variable, but 120 over 80 is just commonly accepted in common parlance as quote-unquote normal. Now, blood pressure variations. Throughout a 24-hour day, blood pressure is different from 120 over 80. Your highest blood pressure is going to be when you wake up in the morning, because your adrenal glands are going to release cortisol, which is going to raise your blood pressure. Without cortisol, you're going to not wake up in the morning. You're not going to wake up in the morning, excuse me. Other things that will affect your blood pressure will be your age. Older people tend to have higher blood pressures. Your sex. Males tend to have higher blood pressures than females. Your weight. Larger people, obesity tends to be correlated with higher blood pressure. Race. Certain races have higher blood pressures than other races. Mood. Anger will raise your blood pressure. Anger will raise your blood pressure really, really, really fast. Really fast. So keep that in check, Internet. All right. And posture may vary your blood pressure. Lying down, your blood pressure is going to be different than standing up. And your blood pressure is going to be really different as you move from lying down to sitting up. Especially if you move from lying down to sitting up really fast. Try it. But not too fast, because if you try it real fast and then fall, I will not be responsible for what happens to you. Just disclaimer. Disclaimer. All right. So, hypotension, low blood pressure, a systolic pressure below 100 millimeters of mercury, is often associated with a long life and a lack of cardiovascular illness if that low blood pressure is not related to some kind of illness. If that hypotension is orthostatic hypotension, where it is a temporary low blood pressure, which is the dizziness when you're suddenly rising from a sitting or reclining position, which is basically what I was warning you about when you would go from a lying down to a standing up real fast, and I told you that I'm not responsible, which I'm guessing some of you paused the video and did real quick, and joke's on you. Chronic hypotension would be a hint of a poor nutrition and a warning sign for Addison's disease or hypothyroidism. Now, understand something. I am not advocating self-diagnosis through WebMD or getting your doctorate through Google University. That is not cool, man. Go see a freaking doctor or something. If you think there's really something wrong with you, go see a doctor that you pay for their services. Okay? We cool with that? Okay. Okay. All right. Now, acute hypotension, meaning hypotension that comes on really suddenly, as in, like, all of a sudden your blood pressure is just drops. That is an important sign for circulatory shock. Now, hypertension. If hypotension is low blood pressure, hypertension is high blood pressure. Sustained elevated arterial pressures of 140/90 or higher. This may be a short-term transient thing, transient meaning it will pass, this too shall pass. This can happen during fever or during physical exertion, you know, running away from like a bear or something. Yes, I know, this is Florida, there aren't that many bears in the cities, but you know, northern Florida could be a thing. Anyway, or emotional upset. This is the internet after all. Emotional upset is really common here. Often is persistent in obese people. Like I said, Florida. Anyway, we get a lot of hate in the comments, I'm pretty sure of this. Now, hypertension. Prolonged hypertension is a major cause of heart failure, vascular disease, renal failure, and stroke. Primary or essential hypertension is about 90% of all hypertension. As in, you have high blood pressure because you have high blood pressure. It's just a thing that you have. So you can have high blood pressure because you are just unlucky, you were born with it, you have a poor diet, you are fat, you are old, you are very stressed, you have diabetes, you smoke. Those are risk factors that increase your risk of hypertensive conditions. That is, those are risk factors for essential hypertension. The hypertension that doesn't go away when you get rid of all of these factors. This may have started it, but by goodness, by God, these things are going to finish it. So yeah. Secondary hypertension is going to be hypertension that has a reason. There's a reason you have this hypertension. And if you remove that thing, the hypertension goes away. So if you have, for example, renal artery stenosis, If you remove that stenosis in the renal artery, the hypertension goes away. If you have a tumor in your adrenal gland and you remove the tumor, suddenly the hypertension goes away. If you have some kind of atherosclerosis or hyperthyroidism and you treat that, the hypertension goes away. That was secondary hypertension. That is less common, far less common. Usually hypertension is just hypertension. Now, let's talk about velocity of blood flow. How fast is your blood moving? Now, blood flow, the speed of blood flow, will change as it travels through the systemic circulation. Blood flow velocity is inversely related to total cross-sectional area. If you think about river rapids for a moment, and I know this seems like a digression, but bear with me. The widest, deepest part of the Mississippi River is slow-flowing and lazy. The water moves very slowly. But then if you come to a part of the river where the river gets shallower, suddenly that water starts to move faster. If you get to a part of the river that is narrower, that water moves even faster. If you get to a part of the river that is narrow and shallow and rocky, that water gets fast and choppy and white water rapids occur. So the total cross-sectional area, the space that the water has to flow through, allows for how much water has to flow through it per unit time. That's how much velocity of flow is allowed here. So the fastest flow of blood is through the aorta, where all of the blood flow has to go through one large artery. Then that artery branches into multiple distributing muscular arteries. And then that branches into multiple smaller distributing muscular arteries. And that branches to multiple distributing resistance arteries. And that branches into multiple distributing arterioles. And that multiple distributing arterioles. Then multiple terminal arterioles. Then multiple terminal capillary beds. And then multiple. And then that turns into multiple capillary beds. And then all those capillary beds, they're going to combine back into venules. And then back from those venules into small veins. And then veins into larger veins, and larger veins, and larger veins. So you can see where we're going with this. The total cross-sectional area of the large arteries is low. And as we go into more and more branches, the total cross-sectional area rises. And then as we get those branches coming back together, that total cross-sectional area decreases again. And since our veins have a larger cross-sectional area than do arteries, they will have a larger cross-sectional area than do arteries, which means our velocity of flow is going to be fastest in arteries, slowest in capillaries, and then medium in veins. Now, let's talk for a moment about circulatory shock. I mentioned this before when I was talking about the pressure, loss of pressure in the blood. Any condition in which blood vessels are not adequately filled, or blood can't circulate normally, or blood flow stops. That's where blood can't circulate normally. That results in an inadequate flow that does not meet the tissue's needs. So that's circulatory shock. We have different kinds of shock. We have hypovolemic shock, where we have large-scale blood loss and there isn't enough volume to fill all the vessels that we have. We have vascular shock, where we have extreme vasodilation, where all of the vessels open up all at once, so that the blood that we had before isn't sufficient to fill all of this new space that we now have. And our flow decreases. Cardiogenic shock, where our heart ceases to pump effectively and we can't move our blood through our vascular system appropriately anymore, and now all the blood stalls. We're going to take a quick break.